everything I'm going to talk about in the next 3 episodes of this. Is a 3-part episode podcast. And it is all about all things talking or speaking or orientation classes or lunch and learns or dinner with the docs. I'm going to, in the next 3 episodes of this podcast, run through the most fundamental principles you have to understand if you're going to do these effectively. And the reason I say that if I had to do this all over again, the reason I say that I would do these and pretty much nothing else, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, I would do other things, of course. But clearly, I do a lot of these. So I honestly believe that there's almost no one on the planet that has been responsible for more lunch and learns and more dinner with the docs, those two in combination, than me. Let me say that again. I honestly believe, I don't think that there's anyone on the planet that's been responsible for more lunch and learns and dinner with the docs than me. Why can I say that, and how can I say that? It's because I have 8 practices, and I am responsible with my marketing team for making sure there are new patients in those practices, which means this is a banker or a home run for us, and something we do regularly. We do it aggressively, we do it a lot, and we've been doing it for years. So in the next 3 episodes of this podcast, I'm going to run through some of the lessons we've learned about doing these. And I'm going to start this podcast by telling you more about specifically going, when it comes to talks, there are 3, right? There's 3 types of scenarios. 1, you're going to do something within your practice to existing members. 2, you're going to do something in the community, which is commonly termed by a lot of people as lunch and learns, and variations of that. 3, we are going to talk a lot about what is commonly termed dinner with the docs, and how to get people to come to you, how to opt in via social media to come to you. And we're going to starting this week with probably the one that most people don't want to hear about right now, but the one they probably need to hear about the most, and that is doing something within your practice, an orientation class, a health class, a mandatory health class, as a lot of people would have termed it, especially back in the day. And I think that's an important point to touch on right now. How and why would anyone make a health class mandatory? And if we go to the fundamentals of why we do speaking, why we do a health class, most people would tell you why you would do it in the practice is to educate your patients. I sometimes think that's almost slightly condescending, that you're going to educate them. And listen, the word educe comes from the word educate comes from the Latin word to educe, which means to draw out. So let me say that again. Not shoving in, but drawing out. My teachers and the people that I spend time with come from the fundamental belief that genius is within every one of us already. Your job is to draw it out. And it is very closely aligned with chiropractic philosophy that we have everything within us to be geniuses and geniusly heal. I mean, the process of healing is a genius process. So we have everything within us to do that. And what I'm basically, the beginning of this talk, of this podcast, could literally be your health class, right? So why do I think it, and why do lots of other businesses, not just chiropractic, think it's so important to do something like a health class, or an orientation class, or a mandatory class? Without sounding condescending, yes, there is an element of education to it, but there's a deeper thing with this. Okay, let me give you an example. We live in an age today where people are pretty much trying to get rid of almost everything that requires human beings. We're going to have driverless cars. We already have driverless cars. We have automated telephone calls going out. We have Siri. We have AI. We have now you're able to simply say to Alexa, you can order things online without even speaking to a human being. You can everything from book your travel to your flights to just about anything you can do online now and not even speak to a human being. So let's start with that. And the interesting part of that conversation is this. Even though that is the case, it is interesting to me to state the following fact. I'm going to mention some names now, some of the biggest online marketers on the planet. Let me be clear. These people have they have made $1 million in a day. Many of them, they've had incredible opportunities to increase their wealth, etc. by not speaking to anyone, by simply sitting at home in front of their computer in their underwear most of the time, and make a lot of money. And a lot of people look at that situation and go, that's the dream. And what's so interesting about that situation is, even with that being the case, they all still get in a plane, fly halfway across the world to speak to an audience. And let me just say that again. Let me start that again. They fly halfway across the world in a plane that's a pain in the ass. When you first start speaking internationally, the novelty is quite cool, and trust me, it wears off very, very quickly. But they still wait in the queues, travel terrible travel times. They still jump on a plane. They still travel halfway across the world to stand up in front of an audience for sometimes as short as 60 to 90 minutes, when they are making up to $1 million a day online. Why in the world would they do that? And here's why they do that. Because I don't care how good you are at marketing. I don't care how good you are at online marketing. I don't care how many leads you can generate. I never forget, my biggest mentors taught me this. Nothing will ever replace both the quantity and quality. Specifically, emphasis on the second part of that sentence, the quality of leads. And there's a third part, in the time frame in the shortest time frame that you can, by doing, except for talks. Nothing will ever be able to match the quantity and quality and the return investment on your time that you'll ever get from talks. Yes, you may generate a lot of leads online. Listen, if you just want a lot of leads, you could just do Groupon. You'll get a ton of leads, I'll tell you that. But if you've been in business for a while, been in practice for a while, you'll know that there's a difference between a lead and a quality lead. And there's this beautiful tension between sales and marketing that will forever exist. And if you don't have a sales and a marketing team, let me tell you who your sales and marketing team is. Your sales team is you. You are the sales guy. You're the guy that does the initial consultations, the report of findings. You are essentially the sales guy. The marketing is, even if it's an internal dialogue, you'll be sitting in an initial consultation, for instance, an exam, and you may be with what, I don't really believe in this, but what people commonly term a tire kicker, and you may think to yourself, damn it, I really hate this. I hate that I'm sitting with this guy, it's wasting my time. That dialogue there is the tension that will always exist between sales and marketing. That just happens to you internally. If you change it up and you have a sales team and you have a marketing team, that dialogue still exists. Trust me, I know. I have salespeople in my business, both on the phone as well as my chiropractors and therapists, and I have a marketing team. And no matter what we do, this is the dialogue that happens. Marketing says to sales, or actually sales will normally moan first. Sales will say to marketing, sales, chiropractors, practitioners, whoever is seeing the lead, for instance, or the prospect at that point, will say to marketing, you need to get us higher quality leads. And marketing, trying to do the very best that they can, will end up saying to sales, you need to learn how to close better. Now, how do I know that? Because I have up to 50 associates at any one time. I've had anywhere from 35 to 50 associates. And I tell you that for 10 years of doing this, that will always exist. And sometimes they'll be using an excuse. So it doesn't even matter how good the person is or bad the person is. You may find someone might, as a justification, will say, well, the reason I'm not doing so well in practice is because you're not getting me high quality leads. So even if it's not true, often what will happen is the salesperson will justify why they're not doing that well, based on the fact that the marketing maybe you at the time is not generating high enough quality of lead. But it's really a mixture of both those scenarios. As I said, if you want a shit ton of leads, you just go and get a whole bunch of leads from Groupon, and you got no problem if that's all you're worried about. And there's a time and place for that. But there is nothing that will. My response to that person normally is, why? Okay, great. You want high quality leads. You need to do a lot of talks, and then we see it. This is what it is. It's what I call the fear. And the fear I'm talking about is the fear of public speaking. If on most polls, if you ask what the highest fear in the world is, most people will say that, depending on the poll, but there are many surveys that would put public speaking ahead of death, which would mean at a funeral, the person, most people would rather be in the box at a funeral or in the casket than saying the eulogy. Isn't that a crazy scenario? As statistically speaking, most people would rather be in the casket than saying the eulogy. So that's when I see it. And as I say, when I see it, it's the fear. It's the fear that people have. Like, yes, I want high quality of leads, but don't ask me to get out there and get into in the public domain and do speaking. So I'm going to address that very quickly. Look, I have a 2-day course on this. If you want to learn how to speak, if you want to learn how to change your life, it changed my life, I promise you that. If you want to learn how to fill the room, how to get people to show up, that's another art. How to then close people and ethically get people to come to the next steps with you, then you've got to be at the events. Please look at the dates. There's one coming up in Dallas, there's one coming up in Windsor, United Kingdom, there's one coming in Barcelona, Spain, and there's another one coming in the West Coast of America. So for this year, so please make sure you check that out. But moving swiftly on, the remit of this podcast is not specifically got to do with getting over the fear of public speaking. There is entire books written about that, and there's entire course written about that, and you should go on those. But the reason why you should, let's skip right to the reason why you should do these talks, is because if Ryan Dice, who's one of the biggest online marketers on the planet, Frank Kern, Russell Brunson, still go to the effort to, and to be clear, you know, they can do everything online. They make millions of dollars online, but they still go to the effort to get people to physically from all over the world show up in a room. Those rooms are not cheap. Let me just explain. You are talking about, I personally know that, to put on a day at the Excel or a big conference center with a big AV team, etc., you are talking in some cases 6 figures. 6 figures for 2 days, I would say. 6 figures, 2 days. It'll often, with the, don't forget all the money it costs to market the room, hire the room, hire speakers, hire AV team, etc. You could easily be dropping 50K. Easily. I mean, that's going to be 100K depending on the spec of all of that. So why do these people go to that effort? If they can sit at home in their underwear and make millions of dollars, why in the world do they still go to all the effort of getting people to fly all the way across the world to sit in a room? Because here is the truth. Again, nothing will ever match the quality and quantity of leads you'll get, but there's a further truth to it, is that everyone thinks it's about educating your patients, which is kind of condescending because they've got genius in them with already. But it's way less about educating your patients and more about creating a community. It's way less about educating and more about creating a community. That does not mean that the education part of that isn't super important. It's an and conversation. But when we say education, it's more. Let's break it down into 2 parts. We have getting people into a live room, and there's an education part. I'm going to skip through all the rubbish for that and tell you that the education part is to almost unapologetically, if you will, quickly let someone know who you are and what you stand for, right? And that's our philosophy. And that is important, but don't forget to you want to freak them out too much. It's called gradient. You want to make sure that you meet people where they're at in some way, shape, or form. And some people hate that saying, some people love that saying, but listen, I've spoken on some of the biggest stages on the planet. I've shared some stages with some of the biggest names on the planet, Robert Kiyosaki, etc. And I will tell you that there is a legitimate concern about, if you will, meeting your audience where they're at. So that's not whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, I don't really care. It's a communication fundamental principle, first of all. So the education part is also broken down into, you are selling, yes, I said it, you are selling the process, of what you stand for. You're also selling the fact, in some way, shape, or form, you're also addressing a lot of objections. So there's a sales principle that says deal with objections before they come up in many cases, in your sales presentations and in your copywriting. So when you're doing talks, you're thinking about addressing objections. Objections like, I've heard that when I see a chiropractor, I have to keep on going forever. I've also heard that you're going to try to sell me something. I've also heard that it hurts. You need to address a lot of these concerns subtly within your education process when people say educate. And for me, one of the biggest points when it comes to education that I hammer home with anything where you're wanting retention, anywhere you're wanting a high lifetime value of a patient or a client, is that for me, one of the biggest things that you need to educate on is that healing takes time. This is creating an anchor, and in that initial opportunity to educate, as people say or bandy around, is what you're really trying to do is you're trying to manage expectations. That is the biggest point of that orientation, mandatory health class, whatever you want to call it. You are managing expectations. You are also teaching, but you are managing expectations. So when you're designing your orientation class, you want to be, if you're not talking about how long things take to heal, if you are not pre-framing how long people have been with you, if you are not showing testimonials about people who have been getting adjusted since birth, if you're not showing case studies about people who started with you 10 years ago who still get adjusted on a weekly basis or fortnightly basis or monthly basis, then you're gonna have a tough time. Your messaging, it's not really, your tongue, whatever you say is your PVA. Whatever you talk about, whatever you repeatedly say, you become, and your practice becomes. So if you're constantly showing those type of scenarios, you're automatically going to increase your PVA and increase or at least manage those expectations. So that's the first part of the education. And the next part of the talk, which I said if you break it down into two parts, it's an education part and there is a community part. The reason that these online marketers still go to all the effort to get people from halfway across the world to show up in a physical room when they really don't need to, they do need to. They understand the marketing principle behind it. They understand the community aspect of it. But they, from a financial perspective, they're making good money. They don't need to do that. But they do need to do it to grow the business. And the understanding that people do business with people. And getting them in a room, you will never, besides a few things that many of us listening to this podcast will never fully be able to experience, and that is the power of traditional media. Traditional media is still king, by the way. Yes, social media is insanely amazing. Don't get me wrong, it's changed my life. But if I could click my fingers right now and be on Oprah, I would take that over any social media marketing campaign. If I could click my fingers right now and have a talk show that's showed by millions and millions of people, listen, let's be honest, if you're on Oprah, you probably never have to worry about marketing for the rest of your life. But that is not a realistic goal for 99% of us. So with that said, the next best thing is to create your own celebrity status, which is you can do kind of through social media. But what do all experts do? All experts, 99% of the planet will stand up in front of an audience and speak. So what you're trying to leverage by getting up and speaking in front of an audience, straight away you're going to be perceived as the expert. That's a big part of the branding process of you establishing yourself as the expert. There is a famous doctor who helps people heal from cancer naturally, Dr. Siegel, and he always says there's three parts to helping someone heal. And it's one, that's essential to helping someone heal from cancer naturally. One is the person's belief in the treatment of choice. He uses the word treatment. Next, he says the person's belief in the provider of choice. And then, which is so important from a chiropractic standpoint, the person's belief in their body's ability to heal. Those three things. He says if those three things are present, if a person believes in the treatment of choice, if they believe in their body's ability to heal, and most importantly, they, in this context that we're talking about today, is they believe in the person they've chosen with their health. Those three things together create magic when it comes to healing. So ignoring this will affect your results, quite literally, with a person. They have to believe that you are the right person to help them. And one of those processes is that you are automatically perceived as more as the expert if you stand up and speak.